for a new lease buyer, somebody who's maybe been a landman for a little bit and they get on a project, or maybe they get on a renewables job or get on some leasing project, and now they're being asked to negotiate agreements. Like, what are some of the things, like basic toolkit that they need? We talked about how you treat people and things like that, but what should they expect to do? What should they be striving to do to be proactive about? What tools do they need? Stuff like that. What are some helpful things for a new landman?
Rule number one, stay out of the bar. That's where your competition is. Seriously.
Rule number two, don't be an asshole. Also,
don't be an asshole. Stay out of the bar. But no, for real. Education. Educate yourself. Absolutely 100%. Start learning everything you can about the rules and regulations so that you can accurately give these lessors the information that they need to make an informed decision on that oil and gas lease. And, don't be a bullshit artist. That's managers' jobs to identify those guys and not let them go out. But those new guys coming in, I would just say, put in the time, man. Just, don't work the 6-8 hour days that, your buddy's working over there. Stay in afterwards, come back home early, do whatever you got to do, and read, just keep pushing to learn as much about the industry as you can, especially in that area. Do you have special field rules? What do you need to know? Being well versed in how to talk to people, if that's a problem for you, then, practicing that daily. Get up and practice in the mirror if you need to. Prepare before you go out to talk to a lessor, like hours ahead of time. Start figuring out what you're going to tell them. What's the conversation? How are you going to lead this conversation? How are you going to break down that wall that they have? I mean, we've dealt with lessors before. I'll never forget when we had a buyer. Well, he was a title guy that was going to get into leasing. And you remember Levi. And he had assigned him to this lady out in St. Augustine County. She had like 180 acres, and she just would not talk to him, wouldn't even say a word. And one day, and he kept going out there. He dropped off gift cards, took her a turkey, all kinds of stuff. And one day I said, I'll go out there with you, Levi. We'll see what's happening. And we get out there and we pull up, and sure enough, there she is on the front porch. No, get out here. I want to talk to you. We're both out of the truck, kind of walking that way. She's like, just get off my property. And I'm like, oh, yes, ma'am. No problem. Hey, I noticed you got a whole shed there full of aluminum cans. What's the price of aluminum these days? She just started talking. Coming to find out, the reason why she wasn't talking is she was still under lease. Levi did his due diligence on that one. It wasn't his fault necessarily. He was recorded in a different county. This track was on the county line, so it was recorded in the wrong county. And so she was scared. She was literally frightened that if she started talking to another landman, that she would get in trouble,
or she would lose her lease.
That she was under lease with. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but it was just a matter of breaking down that wall enough to get her to open up to say, I think I'm under lease and I shouldn't be talking to y'all, and I don't want to get in trouble for this. And I mean, there's no telling how many hours he put in trying to get that lady to speak to him, and money. I mean, he literally was taking her gift cards and stuff, and she just wouldn't ever say a word to him. So you've got to overcome that kind of stuff. And, for some people that kind of comes natural, and others you have to work at it. I know a lot of people that have to work at it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. You just have to practice. And like I say, get in front of that mirror. Talk to your spouse, to your friends. And just like, can I borrow you for a second? I want to go over something with you. What do you think this sounds like? Sit down and just prepare a fair statement.
It's not a natural thing. I talk for a living for the last 20 years, talk to people I don't want to talk to, but
right.
I mean, early on, it was intimidating. What do you say? How do you start the conversation? How do you say no? Like, how do you say, I don't know? It's like, how are you going to navigate the unexpected, right? Because it's a conversation. Jimmy made a great point about educating yourself. Read the lease. Read front to back the lease. Number one. I mean, and listen, an oil and gas lease is full of a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense, to the layman, to someone who doesn't live in that space. And, even more so, we've got a lot of really seasoned agents, landmen out there now, people with 10, 15, 20 years experience now that are working in new sectors, right? They're negotiating a solar lease or a battery storage agreement or a wind lease, or folks all over the South are doing lithium leases. Well, that's an entirely different form, right? CCS, carbon injection leases. Those are entirely different forms. They're entirely different conditions. Economic factors, the consideration associated with it. All those things are different. They're similar in ways, but they're different. And your responsibility is to educate and inform the landowner or the mineral owner. And you got to get versed. Even though you may know everything about something, you got to stop and read the lease, ask questions. One of the best things that helped me early on was I was working with Steve Bryson on a project in East Texas for EOG. And I thought I was pretty damn good by that point. I had 5 years, of doing this. I knew it, right? I've been dealing with, the sweet little ladies that fry me soft shell crabs and bake me a pie, and I drink coffee, and I was, I could get it done. It was great. But I ran into one of these guys up in Longview that was a damn, oil and gas driller, right? He had a small E&P, second generation guy, and he chewed me up and spit me out. Like I went back with my tail tucked, and I was doing a job for Steve. And thank goodness Steve and Dudley were really good friends. He didn't fire my ass. I went to him and said, look, man, I can't get this guy. He's asking questions I don't have answers to. He's saying things I've never heard. And I just kind of shook my head. He said, well, let's go. So we went and sat down with him, and I listened to him, Steve, and this mineral owner. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but I remember the conversation. I remember his desk, his office, everything. They commenced to show me over the next 45 minutes how little I knew about this business. And I mean, I walked out of that meeting. And I talked to Steve about it. Steve works with us today, Dudley. I said, man, I remember that time you just reminded me that I was a damn fool and how little I knew from that conversation. But if you can get that opportunity to sit in and listen to those negotiations, it's invaluable. So if you're a young guy on a crew, ask your crew chief, your leasing crew chief, that they're negotiating a big deal. Hey, can I sit in and listen? Be vocal about those things. Now, so much we do stuff on Teams, we can very easily jump on a call with someone, jump on a phone call and say, hey, I've got Brent here. He's one of our new landmen. He's sitting in and listening in, trying to learn some things about XYZ. Do you mind if he listens in? Nobody's going to mind that. And your crew chief or your leader or the senior buyer on your team is not going to mind that, because hell, somebody had to teach them. But be vocal about that. Be vocal about listening in, because you're going to absorb so much when you can actually have the time to separate yourself and listen, as opposed to having to carry a conversation and be engaged in, like, what am I going to say next? How am I going to respond to this or that? We always encourage that. Jimmy's always been really good about, that kind of part of it, with teaching folks and showing them the ways, the Jimmy ways.
I had a good teacher.